So I'm using PowerPoint tonight. Super, super excited about it. It rounded out. It made everything square. These were all like nice and round and made everything nice and.
You know there is a way in PowerPoint you can actually round it out. If you think that's like the cute option.
I know that. I know. But I have to go back in and do it. I don't want to do that.
Oh, that's why I just think it's square.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order, please. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Celeste, any last minute agenda changes?
Only the Vanda Heine agenda.
Contract.
Okay. All right, moving on next to privilege of the floor. The board encourages public participation at board meetings during a specific portion of the agenda entitled Privilege of the Floor, Public Comment. The public comment section is not the time or place to register complaints about individuals or items that have not first been addressed through proper channels with those closest to the issue, such as a teacher, the building principal, the superintendent, or other appropriate party. Individuals making statements during privilege of the floor are expected to be courteous and respectful, modeling for our students how one can participate and have their voice heard in situations where there is agreement or disagreement with others' views. If members of the public have gone through proper channels and still wish to discuss a matter with the board, they can submit their comments in writing to the board clerk. At its discretion, the board may invite visitors to its meetings to participate in the board's discussion of matters on the agenda. The public comment section is an opportunity for residents and residents only to address the Board of Education. Public comment should take place only in the portion of the agenda designated. This is usually at the beginning of each meeting. Persons wishing to address the board must indicate their desire to speak in advance on the sign-in sheet. Because the board typically has many business items on its agenda, speakers must confine their comments to 3 minutes. The board will not address specific questions, comments, but may ask for your name and contact information in the event follow-up is necessary. The board will not permit in public session discussion involving individual personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent, who will share them with the board at the next executive session. Additionally, promotion of candidates for the upcoming Board of Education election is not permitted during privilege of the floor. So with that, I will go to the sign-in sheet. And the first person who indicated they wish to speak is William Park. If you'd please come down to the microphone.
Good evening. To be clear, there's going to be no feedback on any question that I asked tonight?
Generally, that's the case.
Yes or no? There's no feedback or there is feedback?
I will say, just because this was what happened last time, if you do say something that's inaccurate, I'll correct it. But other than that, I'm not going to give you any feedback.
Okay, that's fair. What I'd like to know is what was the outcome of the $120,000 contract that we signed to educate our teachers on equity and that?
There was never any $120,000 contract to educate our teachers on equity.
So there never was that contract?
So no, there was a contract with a company called Generation Ready. It was nowhere near $120,000 that we spent on it.
How much was it?
I think that we spent, do you recall? Somewhere around 40? I think it was around $40,000. And they did a whole host of things, not just educating our teachers on equity.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep my remarks short. I'm not going to vote for the budget, and I won't because I want to see the academic scores rise in the school district. I don't believe that the kids are getting what they need. And I think that teaching other things rather than reading, writing, and arithmetic is not good. No one's going to be successful. Up at there, you say experiences that they need as they strive to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. I don't know how you can teach some of the stuff that you're teaching. I won't get off the track on that and expect that kids are going to feel good about themselves and actually learn to be able to fit into society when they leave here. Thank you.
Okay, the next person who indicated they wish to speak is Cliff Bradshaw. If you'd please come down.
Thank you. Good evening. This school board exists to keep our superintendent in check. If he's doing something that may harm students, teachers, or the district, it's the school board's responsibility to stop him. The 7 of you are the checks and balances for our school, but over the past 3 years, 5 of you have refused to fulfill this role time and time again. You have closed your eyes and plugged your nose and allowed the superintendent to implement 100% of his harmful, woke, anti-parent policies and agendas onto students, teachers, parents in this community. The 5 of you are complicit in allowing our school district to become a puppet for the big city school policies pushed by New York State and endorsed by our superintendent. From exposing DCS students to a guest speaker with a radical anti-police BLM extremist background, to refusing to take pornographic school library material depicting sex acts of minors out of the hands of students, from discriminating against unmasked and unvaccinated students through repeated forced quarantines, to refusing to survey district parents to find out our view on a possible COVID-19 student vaccine mandate, from holding equity assemblies where our children learned that they were biased racist offenders if they said Merry Christmas or did not fall in line, to the implementation of a socialistic Marxist equity policy, which allows a superintendent to give favor to whom he decides is marginalized victim. I have so many more examples of how these 5 school board members before me have refused to keep our superintendent in check, giving him the stamp of approval on every occasion. Did you know that there is poison in every apple, even this one? Traces of cyanide can be found in apple seeds. Not enough to kill you, but if the seeds are chewed and swallowed repeatedly over time, it would be harmful. But who in their right mind would chew and ingest a large quantity of apple seeds? What if, when we send our youth to school, they are taught that apple seeds should be eaten? What if students were taught that ingesting apple seeds was safe, healthy, and widely accepted among scholars? What if this practice was added to all kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum? The result would be a whole lot of children growing up to be apple seed chewing adults who are oblivious to the harm caused by the cyanide that is being released into their bodies. This is called indoctrination. The Duanesburg schools, our superintendent, and 5 members of this school board are allowing toxic indoctrination to thrive and grow behind these walls. It's time for positive change in our school district. It's time to bring small school, pro-family values back into Duanesburg schools. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Please, parents, don't send an apple to the teacher. The next person who indicated they wish to speak is Julie Lind.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate that we're all created uniquely and have different thoughts, experiences, and opinions. And I think it's important to have conversations with people who think differently than I do. During those times, I need to make sure that I'm listening well, resisting judgment, and not rushing to conclusions. I choose to attend the Board of Education meetings to hear firsthand what decisions are being made and to better understand the impact of those decisions. It's important to me to hear from Board of Education members about their reasoning for making decisions, the decisions that they make, especially when those decisions do not have a consensus. Recently, there's been several Board of Education votes which have been split. It's my desire to understand the reasoning for voting no or abstain for these decisions, but unfortunately, we rarely get to hear about that at meetings. It seems a simple no or abstain vote is cast with little or no discussion or explanation. At the last meeting on April 19th, 2 of the board members voted down the BOCES budget with no explanation. And that leaves me and others wondering if those members wish to cut Duanesburg ties with BOCES services. Of course, that would be a tremendous detriment to Duanesburg students, teachers, parents, and ultimately the entire community. It's also not a fiscally responsive thing to do for many reasons. I'm interested to know what the reasoning is in voting no to the BOCES annual budget, but that was not discussed. By voting down a proposal or budget and not providing an explanation, the rest of us are left in the dark and unfortunately end up jumping to conclusions. By no means would I expect that all 7 members of the board agree, but without justification, it creates division. It's odd to vote something down without giving an alternative plan. It's my hope that the board members will offer open communication, comprehensive discussions, and ultimately work together to find consensus and compromise and seek the best for all students of Duanesburg.
The next person who indicated they wish to speak is Christina Lukides. Please come down to the mic.
I've mentioned the political agenda that is driving actions on the school board and community. Last meeting, we saw 2 board members vote down the BOCES budget. The district is reimbursed for over half the BOCES budget. This reimbursement lets all juniors and seniors choose career and technical education, CTE VOTEC, for job training in trade and technical careers. The BOCES payback also offsets the cost of special education, especially for those kids with the most intense needs. If the majority of the board voted no on the BOCES budget, students' access to CTE VOTEC would be limited or eliminated because we couldn't afford the full price. The district would also bear the complete cost of special education services, and that's very expensive. The same 2 board members want to reduce teacher pay so the district can't compete for quality teachers. They also want to get rid of computers and digital learning so our students graduate completely unprepared for careers in college. And now they want to eliminate BOCES money for CTE VOTEC and special education costs. Nowhere is there a plan to enhance your kids' education or our community. Instead, we see it chipping away at this community school, bit by bit. Slash the budget, don't pay for staff or student programs, disregard financial warnings. And then what? What happens next? Again, this is that political agenda: create distrust, defund, and dismantle our public school. Education, property values, and community are not in the plan. A few years back, we faced another financial crisis where state funding dramatically decreased, which forced small rural schools to explore shutting down and merging with other districts. We united in wanting to keep our school here. We united because the crisis came from the outside, from state funding. Next year, we'll probably face a similar crisis, and the school is planning for that now. Unfortunately, there's a new divisive crisis, and sadly, it's from inside this district. People here convincing others to fear and distrust the school. The school is out to get you and your kids. And they're promising short-term, supposedly money-saving solutions with no long-term plan to grow the school. But at what cost to our community? A poorly funded school, lowered property values, limited education for kids. Distrust, defund, dismantle, that's the goal. The school will not survive over time. Another big empty building in the community. And who knows where your kids will go to school. Or here's a different view of our school. It's the greatest asset of this community. It employs many of our neighbors. Our school attracts young families because of the variety of learning experience from elementary through high school. And the school benefits all of us by increasing the value of our homes. Maintain, sustain, and grow our school. That's how we should be planning for our community school. Thank you.
All right, the next person who indicated they wish to speak is Deanna Fox. If you'd please come down to the microphone.
Thanks for the time tonight. Before I read my prepared statement, I'd like to say that I just sat in on a meeting with Dr. Niedermeyer, where he was very open to everybody's ideas, tried to find ways to include the community, and it was a group that anybody in the community could take part of, and it was only a select few who chose to. So, with that said, one of the greatest ways I have grown as an individual is by doing the deep work to understand other points of view. A monoculture of singular thought is a very boring way of life. Robust conversations that explore the merits of all opinions are critical to a well-lived life, just as they are to operations and decisions within a school board. But the recent 2 no votes on the school board to deny funding to BOCES programming and access to the resources is one that I just can't understand, no matter how many times I have worked to untie that Gordian knot in my mind. Feelings only get you so far. If those 2 members who voted no simply feel that BOCES payments are a deterrent to our district more than a benefit, what are the facts that support that claim? Because facts are facts. Voting yes to fund BOCES is a vote to protect student choice and allow for greater opportunities for students to succeed by means best suited to their life choices and learning styles. Voting yes means less overall cost to our school district, as the estimated return on investment on BOCES payments is tenfold. And voting no means robbing our school of vital resources it needs to succeed. It is a fiscally, socially, and morally irresponsible vote which does great harm to our community, and I feel is a flagrant violation of the 14th Amendment. But you can fact check that if you want to. Civic readiness materials are provided to our school studies department through, wait for it, BOCES. But there are facts that I've come to learn, and I can't speak to the state of mind of the 2 no votes on the board. This all applies to the greater proposed budget as well. Voting no is a financially reckless move. And perhaps we'll never know. Instead of engaging in conversations, the people who vote no have a track record of locking people out of conversation and refusing to be accountable for their votes and decisions. I appreciate all the way the board has worked to truly put the needs of our school ahead of personal politics and ego. And for the members who have gone far above, beyond the scope of their work as school board members, to hear the community and validate other points of view. You are a gift to our community, and thank you for your time.
Okay, that's everyone who indicated they wish to speak. Now we move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. I do have an update from my presentation from last week. I was able to get data from all the remaining school districts. Also, I was able to get updated information from all the school districts based on a more recent state aid run. Although right before the meeting tonight, there was one last state aid run, and I wasn't able to update it based on that. That's probably close to about the same with maybe a few differences. So last time we met, I asked, this question: how do we stack up compared to other school districts? And my point being, if our budget is too high, how does it compare to other budgets? How does our state aid run compare to other state aid runs? What kind of situation is Dwaynesburg in compared to other school districts in the area? So one thing that I was able to update from last time is just the levied taxes, so our school district's taxes that we've levied versus the rate of inflation. So one thing that you can see is that for most of history, our levied taxes have pretty much followed the rate of inflation very closely. What you can notice, hopefully by this graph, is that the last 3 years, the rate of inflation has been very high, which we all know. And we've all felt that at the gas pumps, in the grocery stores. But our levied taxes have remained on a constant trajectory. So they have not followed those big bumps in inflation that the rest of our world has followed. I also wanted to include this. So this was a request from a board member. She asked, well, what is the enrollment of all these different school districts in our region? So there's 24 different school districts in our region. We are the 5th smallest in the region. We are actually 2 people bigger than Middleburg now, and so woohoo! And hopefully nobody moves or anything. And so those are where we stack up compared to other schools. But one of the things that I tried to do in this presentation was break down the per pupil values of different things so that you could see how it compares kid to kid. And that doesn't have anything to do with the overall population. So one of the things that I mentioned last time is that Dwaynesburg will receive the state minimum of foundation aid. This was expected last time. Now it's for sure. We did just get the new state aid run in, and we did get a 3% increase as we expected. And if you'll notice that all the kind of smaller rural schools around us also got 3% increases. So when you read newspaper articles that talk about record increases in foundation aid, as I said last time, that's not us. Those are definitely urban and suburban schools that got those record increases in foundation aid. A school district like Niskayuna got a 42% increase in foundation aid, where we got that 3% state minimum. And I think that over the next couple of years, what we're going to find is that 3% is probably on the high side of what we'll receive, because now foundation aid is totally funded. And so we all expect the aid that comes to schools to go down. Yep. Sure. Yep. Yep. So one of the reasons, so the main reason why is because in 2006, so this is how I answer a quick question is, so in 2006, the state agreed to this foundation aid formula, which would equitably fund schools. And it factors in a lot of things: population of the school, population of special ed in the school, wealth of the school. So it factors in all of these different things. What happened was, for that first year, they actually used that formula to provide state aid, and then they stopped because there was an economic crisis. I'm thinking it was probably the one that Chris was just mentioning when she was speaking. But at that time, there was a financial crisis, and the state said, well, we can't afford to use that formula. So what we're going to do is give everybody sort of a minimal increase. So what the state did was it continued to give kind of everybody that minimal step increase, the minimal percentage increase. And it did that from 2006 until last year. And so what happened at that point was that someone sued the state and said, no, you said you would do this to be fair, and you're not doing this. And so that was caught up in courts for a long time until last year. We got a new governor. The governor settled the lawsuits and said that we will finally fully fund foundation aid. We're going to give you that money back that we said we were going to give you. And so that was in 2006. And so by the time the lawsuit was settled, all of these school districts that had, that earned that money as per the formula had, missed out on years and years and years of increases. So the suburban and urban school districts are the ones that were hardest hit by that. They have the lowest wealth, they have the lowest, highest amounts of special ed students. Basically, the formula was stacked up in their favor. A school like Dwaynesburg was actually being more than fully funded during that whole time period from 2006 until last year. So we were actually benefiting from the fact that the formula wasn't being used, and instead just a minimal amount was provided. If they were to provide us an amount based on the formula, we would not be getting any aid. In fact, we'd probably be getting negative aid. And so that's why we're getting the minimum. Does that answer your question in a really long way? Yeah. Yep. Yep, that's true. So that's just based on math. It's based on a mathematical formula. You plug in certain factors into the formula, and then it spits out what we get. And then we're in this save harmless category, where they're going to give us a certain amount of minimal aid increases, knowing that bills go up every single year. Nope, nope. It is how it is. Yep. Yep.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say that part of that calculation was the amount of students that are in the school.
Yep.
Okay. So it also, and the special ed students also were added to that formula.
Yep.
So state aid does matter how many students are in the school.
So
and
that
our-
does factor into the foundation aid. Yep, does
Right.
factor into foundation aid, that
Okay.
formula.
All right, thank you.
So dollar per dollar, what you'll find is even though we're the 5th smallest district, we're actually getting the second least amount of foundation aid dollars in the region. So we are getting $155,585. And then what I did with that was I divided it by the number of pupils. So I took that total amount of the population and divided the amount that we're getting by the number of pupils. And what you'll find is that Duanesburg actually is going to receive, over the last 2 years, has received the lowest foundation aid per pupil compared to every other school in the region. So one of the things that I mentioned last meeting was that Duanesburg has the second lowest budget-to-budget increase in the region. That's still true. So I was able to get the budget-to-budget increases for all the other districts that I didn't have last time, and it's still true that our 2.07% is still the second in the region, beating Middleburg again by 0.03. The proposed tax levy, so the tax levy that we're proposing is the 5th lowest tax levy in the region. And the only reason why, obviously, all these school districts are different sized, the only reason why I point that out is because when we say that we're increasing our tax levy 2.4%, that means something very different than if a school like Bethlehem were to say we're increasing our levy by 2.4%. That means a big difference in terms of actual dollars. So when you take that levy, though, and divide it by pupils, we actually are the 8th lowest per pupil in terms of the tax dollars that we levy. So another thing that was brought up last time, there was a very helpful suggestion last time that perhaps Jeff and I could take pay cuts or freeze our pay or do whatever, and we could find we could fill that hole in the budget with our salaries. And while I appreciate the sentiment, we actually do this job for money and not just for a hobby. And so we'd like to make what we have been contracted to make. But I did want to find out for you what the other business administrators and superintendents in the region do make. And so one of the things that I found was that we pay the 4th lowest business administrator salary in the region. We are the 3rd lowest superintendent salary in the region. And then just for fun, I also looked at teacher pay. So our median teacher salary is the 2nd lowest in the region. South Colony is on the bottom there, so just point that out. So I also pointed out last time that when we talk about the tax levy increase, there was some kind of idea that was floating around in the community that meant that we were raising people's taxes by thousands of dollars. That's not the case. So it depends on the full market value of your home. So if you own a $200,000 home, the annual increase that you can expect with a 2.4% increase is about $75. I'm going to put this on board docs so that you have this too, so you know what my sources were. But they're from April state aid projections, not the most recent at this time because one just came out. And also there's some stuff from the executive budget proposal in there too. And I used the 22-23 enrollment stats, which just came out. So that changed a lot of dollar amounts because I was just able to get all the enrollment stats for this year because they were just released. And then there were some other sources that I used as well. So that is my updated presentation from last week. Does anybody have any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have the budget presentation.
watching the presentation, if you want to think of any questions that you might want to ask, you'll get a chance to ask person tonight.
Okay, so this is the budget hearing for the May 16th vote. The next session, obviously, we meet the candidates night next week. Some budget highlights. I'll get right into it. We continue existing instructional programs. No cuts to any instruction right now. We maintain existing staffing, maintain existing contractual obligations, continue participation in any outplacements or CTE programs. Some of our biggest increases in our budget this year, we saw are in transportation and facilities, mainly for energy costs, fuel costs to keep the buses running, and energy costs to keep the buildings running, keep electricity and heating fuel.
One thing that I wanted to point out too is that one thing that's different in our school district compared to a lot of the other smaller school districts that I showed just now is the number of courses that we offer, especially AP and other college level courses that we offer. So a stat that I was giving out to, I met with some economics classes to talk about the budgeting process today. One of the stats that I shared with them was that Duanesburg actually has the second highest percentage of students taking AP tests in the region. So about a third of our students take AP exams. And that is, number one is Voorheesville, not Middleburg. So number one is Voorheesville, and we're just about tied with Bethlehem for number two. And so we have a large number of students participating in our college prep programs. And then as you saw a couple of months ago when I presented the CTE numbers, because we don't cap the people that we send to career and technical education, we also have a sizable number of people who are attending those programs. And we also have some people who are doing both of those things, which is even better and creates pretty well-rounded students. Told you I was going to interrupt.
Sorry. And then one of the larger portions of additions to the budget this year is to add an additional school resource officer. So now we have 2 school resource officers. We have one in the high school and one at the elementary school. A portion of the contract for the school resource officer at the elementary school will be paid for by the federal funds, and then that way we'll gradually absorb this cost in a prior year, or in a following year. I'm sorry. So first off, with the expenditures, what we're actually voting on is the general budget, which will be $18,985,000. That represents a spending increase of $385,000, or 2.07%. Looking at a tax levy increase of $207,444, or a 2.43% overall increase, tax levy increase. So you can see the sections of the budget broken down here. Some of the most of the largest increase would be in the instructional side, and then pupil transportation for supplies, keeping the buses running, supply costs, for instance, we had talked during the budget work sessions that the cost of brakes was about, it went up a substantial amount from last year. So any of the metals that we use for parts for buses, it's gone up significantly, so we had to budget for that too. So when we talked during the budget work sessions, we broke it down into these six sections, into talking about general support, academic programs, then operations and maintenance, in transportation, and then employee benefits and debt. So debt service actually fell down this year because we have started to pay off some of our interest payments on our capital project, the one that paid for this auditorium. So some of that is starting to fall off. That is why we were talking about a capital project in the year 2025. So as the debt comes off, we're able to absorb a little bit more to keep maintaining our facilities. Again, the largest increase there, instructional, $279,000. But Then the operations and maintenance and transportation, those went up significantly because of costs to fuels and supplies of keeping our buses running and keeping our buildings maintained. Medical and benefits, a very small amount, especially considering we went up 15% just in health insurance alone last year. So we've looked to another health insurance trust for next year to save some money on health insurance costs in any of those contracts. This is the proposed budget expenses. So the instructional side of the budget is just about 50% of the budget, followed by medical and benefits, which consists mainly of all contracts that are required to be maintained. Then debt service, a little over, well, it's just a little under 1.9 million, which pays for the debts for our buildings and for our buses. General support budget is just over $1 million, so it represents a little over 5% of our budget. And then operations and maintenance is it's a little over 7% of our budget. It's about 1.4 million. So this is another look at the budget in another aspect. It's actually the three-part budget or the component budget. You can see also the program budget has increased a little bit to pay for the instruction of students. And then administrative and capital. Capital went down while some of the administrative costs haven't really increased from last year that much compared to program cost increases. So I've broken that down too and given you a summary of each one of those three sections. You'll also see that in the budget newsletter that will be hitting mailboxes soon. And then the revenue side of the budget, so how we fund our budget, the tax levy, which is between the tax levy and the state aid, are the largest portions of our revenue to fund our budget. So we had the option to go out with a tax cap of 3.91% or $333,000. We chose not to go up to that tax cap, as we have, as you can see, for several years have not gone up to that cap. Going out with a tax levy increase of 2.43%, or only $207,444.
Exactly the same as what I showed you just a couple of moments ago, and it represents what your increase is estimated to be depending on the full market value of your home. This shows the different categories of aid that we have. Foundation aid is definitely our largest category of aid. We also have a category called expense-based aids, which includes things like BOCES aid or transportation aid. And those are things that change depending on how much you use those services. And then we also have a smaller category of aid that includes things like software and technology textbooks. So total aid, about $8.9 million. So it's almost the same as the amount that we're levying. Very, very similar.
So this is a summary of our revenue budget, and as reflected in the past couple slides, that the real property taxes and the state aid, they represent about anywhere from 46 to 47% each of them each year. So the other sources of revenue are pretty small compared to those two large chunks of our revenue. And then there are some budget gaps, so we balance that with fund balance or savings from prior year and reserve appropriations. So over the past couple of years, we have increased our reserve appropriations slightly. So getting up to that point where, since school districts are only allowed to have 4% in undesignated fund balance, when you're balancing the budget with that fund balance, if you start to exceed that amount, it starts to become a little riskier, especially as we had seen since 1920, we kept stepping up and increasing our savings. So we have to be cautious about continuing to use our savings because eventually we may run out of that. So I'll step back. This just, again, just a visual of those two largest sources of revenue for our budget. There's some small things like donations and fees that come in into play into the other category. We have Medicaid costs, so we get Medicaid reimbursement for some of those expenses, and then we balance the budget there with fund balance and reserve appropriation. So at the budget vote, the propositions that will be that you'll be voting on are three different propositions. One will be to approve the 23-24 school year budget. The second proposition will be to approve to use up to $6 million in existing capital reserve fund for phase one of the Centennial Capital Project. And then the third proposition will be to approve the purchase of 3 school buses with a maximum cost of $400,000. So this is just a look at just a summary of Proposition 1. It'll be to approve that budget of $18,985,000, a spending increase of $385,000 or 2.07%, with a tax levy increase of $207,444 at 2.43%. The second proposition, I've included some Q&A on this section just because, just to be helpful. So what the Proposition 2 will be to vote on is to expend that $6 million, that portion of the capital project that has already been approved, up to $28 million. So the $6 million will offset the need to borrow $6 million and pay back in interest. So this was actually, this capital reserve fund was set up years ago to plan for a future capital project that allows us to maintain our facilities. So this is not in addition to our capital project that's already been approved. This is a portion to actually save on that borrowing cost for that $6 million. So the only portion of the project, that $28 million, that we'll actually have to borrow is up to $22 million. So this takes that savings that was in that account and spends it towards that capital project. The third proposition will be to purchase the 3 school buses, one of them a 71-passenger propane-powered bus, and a 30-passenger bus, and then a 21-passenger wheelchair bus. So in total, those quotes came in on state contract at $380,000, just or a little over $380,000. So we've got a little wiggle room in case any of those contracts with New York State happen to go up. We have seen some of the New York State contracts fluctuate over the past several months just because of inflation. So we did leave that leeway. However, right now our quotes came in at $380,000. So what happens if the budget gets voted down and we end up going to contingency budget? So if the budget gets voted down the first time, the Board of Education has the option to go out with a second vote to either vote on the same budget or to modify the existing budget that had been proposed. After that, then the district would need to go into a contingency budget, which then we discuss the recommendations to reduce some of the extra things that we may have in the district, which is not that much. So we're going to be talking about cutting things like extracurricular activities, sports, equipment for sports, all community facilities usage. This is actually mandatory, so the buildings would only be open during school events or during school. So no outside community usage. We would also be talking about the possibility of instructional programs such as, anything that might be not mandatory in instruction. And then any extra trips or field trips with transportation. Late runs, field trips for classes, or possibly extra competitions that the athletics might participate in. So
Our budget can't go up in a contingency budget. We're still obligated to pay all of our contract raises, right? So those don't go away just because we're in contingency.
So, and that being said, so also in a contingency budget, the tax levy does remain at a 0%, but because you're at 0%, you're going to be looking at cuts because you cannot increase and continuously increase your budget while not funding those extra programs. Question?
So there's lots of things that we could do to get to a contingency, like putting a cap on CTE. We could look at all elective area classes. So pretty much anything that's not tied to graduation requirement are things that could be looked at to reduce money if we needed to. So while we would still do BOCES programming, we could decide that we want to limit the number of students who go. We could look at some AP classes. A lot of those AP classes have some of the smallest enrollment we have in the district. So, you know, if a class only has 5 students in it, that might be one that we potentially look at reducing if we need to save some money. Yep. I don't think that there's much of a chance in that. I think that those classes are pretty low cost, and also they're usually co-seated with in larger class sizes. So I think that we're probably okay with that. But some of the AP courses are pretty tiny. Sarah, did you have a question?
So sorry. In the event, if we did get to the point where we're at a contingency budget, would we have the flexibility to use some of our fund balance to offset the time period between having the contingency budget and a revote instead of cutting some of the programming and the BOCES?
So we're already using about $1 million of fund balance in this budget.
Right, but I mean, in addition to, should this be the scenario we're up against, do we have the flexibility to transfer some of that savings and use it?
I think you mean use additional reserve funding?
We have about over $6 million in fund balance, do we not?
You're talking about the
Right.
reserve fund.
I am, yeah.
Reserves and fund balance are
Right.
two different things. So fund balance is money that we have left over at the end of the year this year, and then reserves are those savings accounts.
Right, I mean,
think what you're talking about
could
is the
we use
capital
both of
project.
them, essentially, is my question.
Well, we already are using both of them. Could we use more fund balance? How much fund balance would we have remaining over? If you decided that you wanted to go down below 4%, you could use additional fund balance. And then if something were to happen, the school district would not have enough money to pay its bills. You could decide, if you wanted to, have a vote to transfer money from capital reserves or some other reserve account over to the general fund. You could do that, but then that can only be done, you can only use your savings to pay your bills so many times.
Right, but I guess I'm wondering if we're that concerned about making the bills, paying our teachers, paying our contracts, is this the capital project the way that it's structured right now? Is it?
That is
is
not.
it
You could do that.
going to be, you
You
know,
could do that. It's
if
not
we
a
broke it up
sustainable.
into 2 pieces
Yeah.
instead, and then we use the money responsibly from the fund balance should we need to, that we had the option there to break the $28 million into 14 million phase 1, 14 million phase 2.
The
Should
answer
we
is
need that money, we could use it then.
no. So you're now saying that we would do a reduced capital project?
Just break it into phase 1 and phase 2.
So the capital project's already been approved at $28 million. So that's the capital
I
project.
guess I'm just looking for other options to solve a problem.
Yep.
So
That is not an option.
I think anything could be if
it's
we
not-
vote on
it's-
it.
It's not really sustainable to keep using that amount of fund balance or to use your savings. If you use all your savings in 1 year to balance your budget,
So we just have to keep raising taxes? Is that our answer?
inflation causes all of the expenses for the budget to increase. So
I understand that.
we have to continue to pay for the increased costs of the contracts and the supplies and everything that keeps the district flowing at that increased rate. So to continue to just use your savings without increasing your taxes is not sustainable. You might you might be able to float a budget for a year or two, and then after that, you're looking at banishing the district.
Right. Just
You're looking at having conversations with other districts.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
And you're also not taking into account the fact that we don't have a positive outlook for state aid in the future either.
right. I'm just wondering if we should be thinking about solving this problem creatively now before we're actually at that point where we have less money coming in from the state.
Do you have another slide? Okay, so we have a budget vote on the 16th. That's when we'll also have a Board of Education vote. There are 2 seats open and 4 candidates running. There's a Meet the Candidates night next Thursday right here in the auditorium. Now I will, with the board's permission, I think that, do they have to vote, Celeste, to open it back up to the audience?
Jim, I just would like to add one thing before you start that. You know, kind of tying in the contingency budget slide at the end with your presentation earlier, you know, in my view, the school has been very responsible fiscally. You know, if you think of those charts, you know, we're not one of the highest spending schools. We're one of the lowest spending schools. So it's not like we have a lot of fat in the budget to play with to make these sorts of transfers. So, you know, I think you guys have done a great job, and I think the facts back that up.
In doing this, I've done a lot of research, and 2011 was a bad year. There was a lot of state aid cuts, like 11%. And that year, we did massive cuts. We cut all after-school buses. We made a lot of teachers partial time. We did all sorts of things. And that is the beginning of the slide of academic performance you saw on those tests. That's it. I don't have exact math that that's it, but the graphs show that those are the dates that all started. So I'm not wild about a tax increase, but compared to other districts, we're doing well. I feel like we've made the choices we need to make, and I don't see how, if we keep Duanesburg the way we want it to be, that we don't move forward with this tax increase, unfortunately.
So if somebody wants to make a motion, we can open it up to public.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, my first question is, how many questions can I ask? Okay, so I'm going to put my PTA hat on then. So if the budget does not pass and we go into a contingency budget, does that mean organizations like PTA, which put 15 grand this year back into our school district, without asking for any money of the school, would no longer be able to use the school building where we generate income from?
Yeah, I do think that's correct. Any other questions?
First of all, I did not know that we have the second highest percent of kids taking AP courses. I think that that's very, very impressive, as well as all the kids who go to CTE and many of the kids who do both CTE and AP courses. And I think that really speaks to the academic focus of a school like ours. Again, we're really small, but we offer so many things for the kids to do academically and career-wise for learning. And I just think that that's really impressive for such a small school. Now I forgot my question. My question was this. I remember when I was on the board, we would always get reports about, the auditor's reports, looking over the budget and all of that. And I know that everything is very tightly controlled. To Shane's point there, that these are all formulas that the whole budget is based on, and the regular spending. Could you explain the process of oversight for the budget and the amount of auditing and who does it, just so people are aware of all of that, the oversight that happens on the budget? Thank you.
Jeff, would you like to speak to how we make sure there's no waste, fraud, or abuse?
Sure. So every year we are audited by an external auditor. They come in and they start their process actually in May of every year. We actually just at one of our prior meetings just found a new auditor. We had been using one for several years, and now it's time for a new one. So that process is starting for the 22-23 school year within the next few weeks. And then also we have, on every payment that we make, we have an internal auditor that reviews every single payment and makes sure that those expenditures are following policies and laws.
We also submit reports annually to the comptroller, to state ed, just about everything that we've spent through the federal grant recently. So that's all gone through, that all has to go through state ed for review, and then you're audited on that. And you can find old audits on the comptroller's website and various other places online, but most of the things are checked and then double checked by state ed, and then triple checked by the comptroller's office. And so there's an awful lot of fail-safes in place to make sure that we're not spending our money incorrectly, saving too much, which is maybe a problem that is nice to have, but still the comptroller will slap your wrist if you do save over 4%, or if you're using your reserves inappropriately. And they'll also probably make a comment if you're not using reserves, to bank some of your fund balance as well.
That being said, we also have a mandatory transparency reporting that is submitted annually to the state and to the federal level. So both of those levels of education also have the ability to look at our fiscal responsibility as well. And annually, the state issues an observance of where we are financially. So they are constantly looking at what we are doing and how we are doing it.
How do we usually do in those audits, Jeff?
We do well. So the past couple of years, there have been no issues of any, or there have been no written notices of any issues on the general audit. So we've been following the rules as best as we possibly can and doing what we're supposed to do, and we will continue to do so.
I will say also, interestingly enough, so the comptroller's office puts out a fiscal health report on school districts annually, and we are also a very healthy school district. The one indicator that's noted for us that causes some level of concern is the rate of passage on our budgets. So the rates of passage on our budgets tends to be fairly low, and that is the only indicator of possible financial risk. Other questions?
Thank you. On April 19th and on April 20th, April 19th was the Board of Education meeting. I asked the school board, and I asked you, Superintendent Niedermeyer, via email on April 20th, if we could go out with a 0% tax levy increase and pass the budget, a win-win for both, for everyone, by taking a little tiny bit of that $6 million in surplus out of the savings, okay, out of the building fund. And I suggested that we add a fourth line, a fourth proposition to the 2023-2024 school board budget ballot that said, quote, approved to use $207,444 for the existing capital reserve fund to cover the 2.43% tax levy increase that the proposed 2023-2024 budget vote would require. And I also suggested that this would allow a 0% tax levy increase. Yeah, we're taking a little bit out of the, you call it a fund, but whatever. Out of the surplus, I see it as. It's money that's just sitting there. It hasn't been allotted to anything yet. Hold on, let me just finish. My question is, why didn't you respond to my question, my email, or my questions on the 19th?
So in my opinion, it's a very, very bad idea to use something that voters voted on for something other than the purpose that it was intended to be used for. So there are a couple of votes in your proposal. First of all, there's no logistical way at this point in the budget process that you could add another proposition on the budget. Second of all, the $6 million that you're saying is sitting there because in 2018, the voters voted to establish a capital reserve for the purpose of not having to borrow as much for the next capital project. Okay, so voters already voted to establish that fund to be used in that way. And so to say at this point, we're not going to use that money for that, we're going to disregard the feelings of the voters who established that fund for that purpose, it was very specific what that purpose was. We're going to disregard that, and then we're going to also disregard the feelings of the voters who voted on the capital project. The capital project was established with that $6 million in mind so that the capital project would have a 0% tax impact. That's how we always presented it. That $6 million would be used for that. So that would also be disregarding their vote. So what you're suggesting is a dishonest way to use that money. I know you don't agree, but I'm telling you what my opinion is, since you asked. Because I didn't think that it was a very serious proposition. I think that I've given you some
Can we
time.
move on to questions that are specific to the budget, please?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what Ed Law 3651 says. Only if we got zero state aid could we use the capital fund to fund the budget.
But we've also talked about where we're able to move funds between fund balances should we need to. We've already established that.
Yeah. So there are
No.
reserve funds that you can do that with. This one would require a community vote, which
Sure.
we've already had to establish this fund.
Right. But I'm wondering if people are suggesting maybe they would appreciate if we checked in with them due to the last year or two change of inflation happening. Maybe people feel differently and they want to be heard in the fact that possibly their financial situation has changed since that original budget was voted on.
I understand that position. I don't agree with it, but I understand it.
The capital project was also approved 8 months ago,
true.
not in 2018.
Any other questions? The capital project. So there's a $28 million capital project that was approved in December. The capital project? So that's not part of the budget. It's a very large project that has a bunch of different phases in it. If you could look on our website to see all of the different things that the capital project's doing. Yeah, so that's something that we talked about. That's something that we had talked about for months and months. Yeah. Other questions? Yep. So teachers negotiate for raises, and so there's usually an increase every year. We need to pay for it somehow. Yeah, all staff. So support staff, everybody. Yep. Yeah. I think I think for right now that's a future question and not a next year question for the budget. So we are allowed to continue to buy gasoline buses until I think 2027. Is that right? And I think that everybody believes right now that even though there's been no adjustment on the timeline for when we have to do that, everybody believes right now that that's not really a feasible thing that districts are going to be able to do. The most significant problem right now is the lack of infrastructure to support all of these school districts going to entirely electric bus fleets. There just isn't the infrastructure in place to do that. So even if we wanted to buy the buses, we wouldn't be able to plug them in anything. And there's also problems with the technology. There's some school districts that were kind of early adopters, and they've had some difficulty with a lot of issues. And some of those districts don't have the problems that we have to contend with, like the range that we have to travel, the hills that we have. So there's lots of problems in Dwaynesburg specifically with that electric bus fleet. So your question's a really good one, is how will we budget to make that happen? So this year we were able to get a grant that would have covered a portion of a bus. And unfortunately, we had to decline that grant because it wouldn't pay for enough of that bus, and it didn't do anything about the infrastructure problems that we had. So even though we wanted to start on the path toward this using grant money that was available, we couldn't do it. But what we hope happens is that there is actual serious conversation after this year at the executive level, at the state level, to talk about how we're actually going to do this and what is realistic for us to get to that goal of having all electric fleets. But right now, there's just so many questions with that the advice that we've gotten from lots of folks and that we decided to go with was to wait and see what happens. One thing that we are doing, though, is you'll notice that one of the buses that we are buying is a propane bus. So propane has lower emissions than gasoline. So we're doing that as sort of an intermediary step to lower our emissions, at least, using a technology that we know is proven. Our mechanics know how to work on propane buses. We've had propane buses in the past. So we're sure that that's going to be feasible for our district. So we're trying to make a baby step toward that goal, but we're just not there yet. Anything you want to add?
So yeah, we have made some progress towards the state's mission to get rid of diesel buses. So our district does not have any diesel buses on the fleet anymore. We got rid of our last diesel bus a few years ago. So while we do have propane and gasoline buses, the propane buses have proven to perform well in our district, where other neighboring districts that have adopted the electric buses have found that mileage isn't their greatest benefit to these electric buses. So there were so many different things that went on with this grant that we would have had these hidden costs and risks that we would have been putting our district to by taking advantage of that grant. So we will let the early adopters adopt and learn from what they're going to find out for us. And then that way we're not going to have buses sitting in our parking lot not going out and picking up kids. No, that is the cost.
That's how much a school bus costs.
That is the cost.
It's not how much an electric school bus costs. An electric school bus costs around $400,000.
It was over $400,000.
Yep.
So that's why we've opted for the propane bus at $174,000. Full cost of the bus.
It's a state
State
contract.
contract.
Any other questions? Yep.
If we end up going to a contingency budget, would that be for the whole school year? And how would that impact aftercare and the youth basketball over the winter?
So, yes, it would be for the whole school year. It would impact youth basketball because we wouldn't be able to use that facility. I don't know about aftercare because I don't know about that. I'd have to check in on that. Other questions? Yep. You want to holler?
So during the April 5th, the minutes for the April 5th school board meeting, it says in a side note, Generation Ready has not been used for several years, yet it was used on October 7th during the conference days. So I was just wondering, I know it was brought up earlier, could you just give some detail on why it says here and why you said that we're not using it, but we still are using it, and what the actual cost of it is for the future? Thank you.
I'm not sure what the fascination with Generation Ready as a vendor is. Generation Ready does a lot of different kinds of training. We did have a trainer that worked with a handful of teachers on co-teaching practices in the fall, and I do think that she may have been paid for through Generation Ready, but she also does other contracting work too. So I don't think any dollars from the budget have gone to Generation Ready. All of that was from federal stimulus money. So Generation Ready has never been in our budget. Is that right?
Correct. So we did use the BOCES contract, which was funded with the federal funds.
Yep.
Through the BOCES bill.
So because a vendor did a training that we asked them to do, so we asked them to do training on equity for our teachers, they came and did that training for us. That doesn't mean that this is some crazy socialist Marxist organization that does solely equity-based training. So just as the person that you mentioned in your comment was a Black Lives Matter activist, she's actually a professor at University of Albany. She's a professor of special education. So just because that person you found on Facebook holding up a sign, that doesn't mean that that's what she does when we invite her to speak on different things. Trainers generally will train on what we've paid them to train on. So Generation Ready did special education training in addition to the equity training too, okay? So we're not planning on using them as a vendor in the future, but that's not because they're a bad vendor. That's just because we've run out of things that they offer that we're interested in providing. They're very good trainers. Yep. Okay. Is that our marketing budget is not a thing. So not really. I think teacher shortage in general right now is a huge problem. And so to attract teachers at a school that, as you saw, does not have the highest median salary is very challenging. Other questions? Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Want to be fair. Does anybody have any questions that haven't gotten a chance to speak yet? Okay.
Hold on a second, please. I think we should prevent this from devolving into a debate. If you have a question about the budget, please. You were given latitude earlier to bring up something that had nothing to do with the budget. So I'm sorry. Please save your statement. Please save your statement. Mr. Bradshaw, we want to hear questions about the budget, not about some different agenda. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, folks. Okay. Any last question? Okay. So now you have to motion to.
Probably motion.
Well, let's vote back in, and then you can ask a question. Okay, motion to move back into session.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, good. Okay, Avis, you had a question, please.
Actually, I have a two-part question. So how many students did we have last year and the previous year? Yes. 2 for this year.
633 students last year.
Okay, what about the year before, like during COVID? You don't know?
I got 2 years in my memory, and that's all I got.
Okay, all right. That was my question. Thank you.
We didn't experience a big drop off in enrollment during the COVID year, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, for my own personal reasoning, the amount of students that we have, it costs $18.9 million to fund all of them. I mean, I've seen all the audits. The instructional programs, what instructional program costs the most? The teachers, okay.
Teacher contract is almost all of our instructional costs, and our increases are teacher contract increases.
So that includes BOCES though in the instructional program, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Some parts of those.
A lot of BOCES, you said? Okay,
So also, special education costs are in there too.
correct.
So not only just special education teachers, but contracts to send special education students out to outplacements that, for placements that we don't have the ability to educate those students in-house.
Okay,
So those are all in.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Goodness. A question, comment, just clarification. So if I'm doing my math correctly, Tony can check me. We're trying to make up $385,000, right? Year over year, is that right? That's the increase, is $385,000. $155,000 of that, roughly, a little bit more than that, is coming from state aid. And then we've asked for $207,000, roughly, from taxes. That actually still doesn't cover the $385,000 that we need. And that $385,000 is made up, if I'm understanding correctly, by typical expected contractual increases in salaries and benefits, right, for our staff and employees, inflation, and the school resource officer that we as a board voted to employ, correct? Those are the three main things that are creating the $385,000 increase. I would certainly say that I know that we cannot control inflation. I know that we not only must, but should be paying our teachers what we have said we would, and probably more, but we can't at the moment. And I think that this community would be very upset if we were to go back on the school resource officer, because that's been something that has been a really important issue across the nation, around the world. So I think that the three areas that are driving our budget up relatively minimally are something that we cannot control because we're not in charge of inflation, something that we must pay because it is our employees' livelihood and care, and something that is going to keep our children safer when they're in the building. And I just wanted to make sure that I had my numbers right and that I understood where those increases were coming from.
And as you stated, the difference is actually made up with additional fund balance. So we put additional fund balance into that budget.
Right, if my math is right, it's about 22 grand, and we're taking that out of our savings account, correct?
Just under 22, yes.
Yep, okay.
Right on.
22,971 is what I had written down. Thank you.
Just one more additional thing. So we had talked about using additional reserves, right? And so the board actually voted on that as well. So the board indicated that they would like to keep the reserve appropriation flat. And so originally we had designated more reserves balance, but after hearing the presentation from ASBO, we decided that it probably wasn't a good idea to do that.
I just have one quick comment because you know I don't say too much, but it always comes off as that the teachers are the reason taxes go up, and yeah, but because the teachers are this building. If we didn't have the staff and the instructional staff and the support staff, we don't have a building. And we have to pay these people to keep the school going. Yes, it sounds like everybody's making $1 million, but trust me, they aren't. And it's just necessary to support them too. It's not. It just always looks like that part of the budget is the most horrendous part, and that we're walking away with. Yes. Everywhere. Thank you.
I just wonder if something that is included in the budget that kind of hasn't really been given so much a label that I just wonder we should be talking about is we also have become responsible to pay for retirement systems and, past teachers that have retired for their health benefits and things like that. So it's not just actively the teachers that are working now. We have those obligations from the past. Um, but I think that sometimes that gets difficult because like the longer people live, that number is actually growing too. So maybe it wasn't accounted for on the front end 20, 30 years ago when we made these contractual obligations, and now we do have to follow through on them. So I just wonder if that's something that really hasn't been talked about, that is quite an expense too, that we should just be aware about. Right, like it's not broken out separately, correct? It's kind of lumped together with instructional?
No, so that's in, so here's your medical and benefits portion of the budget.
Yep.
Oh, so the medical and benefits portion of the budget there is just under $4 million. So it is a large portion of the budget. It represents a little over 20% of the overall budget.
So where's
so
the
that
retirement?
What's that?
So then what section
So-
on this pie chart is the retirement?
So retirement is included in that medical and benefits, and the breakdown for the budget for each budget line is actually posted on board docs. So you can find the retirement section, any medical and benefits, anything that you would find in that section is towards the bottom of the budget.
Okay.
So it would be towards the 9,000 section of the budget.
Oh. Right, and do they not like go up as everything else is going up too? So, I think that that's just part that we know about, but it's not broken out separately. So I just wanted to clarify if anyone else had the question out there, maybe where in these categories that would fall.
So retirement system alone is close to $1 million. Health insurance costs are at about 2.4 million. So that like health insurance alone is part of that medical and benefits, that 3.9. It's one of the largest sections of that portion at $2.4 million. So we do. Yep. I'd also like to highlight that the $100,000 in reserve that we chose, as I mentioned, was part of the ERS, so the retirement system. So to balance the budget, we had elected to use $100,000 out of reserve, which would go from the employee retirement system reserve fund to balance the budget into a retirement expense in the budget. So that's why we've taken, so we have, we're utilizing that savings to balance the budget with the expense.
One more question. And because we're taking money out of savings, that means we're not adding to savings in this budget at all?
Definitely less than we have in years past. I'd mentioned during one of the work sessions that, we had gotten to March 14th. I'd picked that date because it was a snow day and I was sitting at home, right? So we had spent, 2 years ago, we had spent 51% of our budget on that date. Last year, we had spent about 54, 55% of our budget on that date. This year, we've spent over 59% of our budget on that exact date. So that tells us something about our spending for this year, that we've spent a larger percentage of our budget to continue to pay for the required things that we have to pay for a school. So we're projecting less in savings this year at the end of the year that will be able to keep us going, to keep balancing our budgets, to use that fund balance or reserve. So.
Okay, moving along with the agenda. Next up is approved minutes of the April 19, 2023 Board of Education meeting. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the meeting minutes from the April 19, 2023 meeting as submitted. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Avis. A second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Francis. Questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to Board of Education standing committees. Audit committee, did you meet? No? Okay.
We had
How
no
about
meeting.
building and grounds?
We have not met.
Buildings, it didn't meet, but the playground committee did meet, and I do need to call a buildings and grounds committee meeting because we narrowed it down to 2 vendors for playgrounds.
That sounds like a fun meeting.
It's going to be a fun meeting. We're going to talk about merry-go-rounds and monkey bars and all kinds of stuff.
Fantastic.
And so we'll be talking about that soon, but both vendors seem really great, and so I'm excited that we'll be putting together a great playground for our kids, which is part of the capital project phase 1, and it'll start next summer. Okay, the building will start next summer.
Nice, nice. And then lastly, policy committee.
We have not met.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're moving on to financial items. Accept financial reports. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the general warrant A32, $257,219.81, and capital warrant HQ2, $40,640, dated April 19, 2023, and appropriation status, budget transfer, ECA, revenue status, and treasurer's reports ending March 31, 2023, as provided and recommended by the Treasurer and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Teresa. Second? Melissa, thank you. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Moving on to the next item. Approve memorandum of agreement between the district and the Duanesburg Support Staff Association. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Duanesburg Central School District hereby approves the addendum to the employment agreement of the DSSA contract dated May 2, 2023. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Thank you, Francis. A second?
I'll second.
Tony, thank you. Questions or comments on this item?
Just that this is in addition to the several MOUs that we passed last meeting. This one and the next item are both would move 2 additional units from the old trust to the new trust, which is called Fulmont.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, the provider for health insurance for our employees was kind of dissolving that plan. And so essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a contract with our employees that we will provide them health insurance. So because the old provider is dissolving, we need to find someone new to provide an equivalent service to them.
That's right. So our current plan was continuously seeing increases that were not sustainable. Last year, we saw a 15% increase on our health insurance. Folks in the community had to pay for the increase of the health insurance, as well as our staff members. So their deductions also went up 15%, which is not as much as their paychecks went up. Percentage-wise anyway. So the risk for next year was that they had threatened a 25% increase. And again, the following year, they said it probably won't go down much less than that, or much more than that. So in trying to maintain the contracts, we seeked another a trust that is larger and has more districts in it, and will give us a better buying power with our health insurance. They're providing a slightly different health insurance plan. Most of the benefits to all the employees are very similar. The Medicare Advantage plan, I might say, is a big savings to the district because it is actually a Medicare Advantage plan. And the employees will, anybody that is paying a two-party Medicare Advantage plan will actually see a humongous savings in what they're due. So we'll be joining up with this new health insurance trust to just save a lot of money and be more sustainable with our health insurance contracts.
So we were looking at a 25% increase, and this is about a 7% increase?
Yep. So
both Empire plans, right?
Yep. So we're staying with our health insurance that we had. It's an Empire, still going to be dealing with the same people at Empire. So that's why I say people won't really notice much of a difference to their coverage. The Empire product is actually very, it's you can use it. You can use it all the way down the eastern seaboard, as far as I know. Taking my kids to urgent care.
Okay. So it sounds like I may have misunderstood a little bit. It's not that the old plan's dissolving. It's just that they really raised their rates very high.
They did. So the trust is it is dissolving because there's only 3 districts in the trust.
Oh, okay. So it was kind of both.
Yep. So there's 3 districts in the trust. We all decided that this is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for any of those districts. So we've chosen to dissolve the trust and move on to better and more sustainable things.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions or concerns? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to the next item, approve memorandum of agreement between the district and the Duanesburg Teachers Association. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the memorandum of agreement by and between the district and the Duanesburg Teachers Association regarding establishment of a new voluntary payroll deduction. The agreement shall not be binding until authorized and signed by each party's respective representatives. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Melissa. A second?
I'll second.
Francis, thanks. Questions or comments on this item?
So Can you just explain a little bit exactly what the deduction is for? Vote cope?
So Vote Cope is a political action arm of NICET, and so it's a voluntary deduction if people want to participate in that. They
So it's
advocate,
pol-
they
we're-
advocate
we're
for
putting politics on the deductions?
if they choose to.
Teachers, I donate to Vote Cope. It comes out of my paycheck every week, and it's my voluntary decision to do that, but all teachers don't do that, but a lot do.
Okay, all right.
It's to protect their interests for NICET, New York State United Teachers.
Do we normally approve these possible deductions?
Yeah. Okay. So there's only one other deduction. I think it's for union dues, right?
I'm sorry, I just have, it's not, I think I read that it wasn't mandatory, right? So a teacher can opt out?
Yep.
Okay,
They probably have to opt in.
Yep.
right, you have to opt in.
They have to opt in.
Okay.
And we're just voting on it because it's on their paycheck that the district is distributing.
Right. Thank you.
And this is the teacher's money. It doesn't cost the district anything. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item. Approve Beaumont Health Trust Resolution and Health Plan Agreement. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the resolution and admittance and assessment agreement by and between the district and the Beaumont Health Trust and Plan. The agreement will only be effective upon the approval of the Board of Education and shall not be binding until authorized and signed by each party's respective representatives. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Melissa. Sarah, would you second?
I'll
Thank
second.
you. Questions or comments on this?
This is essentially just to continue on from the memorandum
Yeah,
that we
this
just
one,
voted on,
this one's
correct?
to actually get into the trust. So this is
Right.
the agreement to get into the trust. We've already moved some units over.
Yep.
This one's to actually establish that we're paying to get into it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
Thanks for the clarification. Anyone else, please? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item. Approve transfer of funds for special education contractual services. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education approve the following budget amendment. Transfer $57,188, reflected below, for the purpose of paying for special education outplacement invoices as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Tony. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Francis. Questions or comments?
Question.
Please.
So I see the budget coding, but can you explain a little bit better what budget line we're transferring from and what budget line we're transferring to?
So the funds that are being transferred is staying within the special education budget. We have the money available in the special education budget line that pays for BOCES special education expenses. We are moving it to a contractual line for a special education contract that is not a BOCES product.
Oh, so we have to move it out.
So we're
We have
just
to vote
moving
to
it.
move it out of the special ed BOCES line within the special ed budget to another line because we need a service BOCES can't provide.
Yes.
Okay.
So the attachment shows that we are moving the 57,000 from budget line A2250.49 to A2250.40, which is a contractual line. And this is a board action because it is a transfer that is over $15,000, which is required by board policy.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item. Accept agreement with Middleburg Central School. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education approve the following budget amendment. Transfer $57,188 for the purpose of paying for special education outplacement invoices as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion? Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the Health and Welfare Services Agreement between Middleburg CSD and Duanesburg CSD for the 2022-2023 school year as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Teresa, thank you. Second, please.
I'll second.
Tony, thanks. Questions or comments? All in favor?
I was just curious, what,
It's either a
What-
private school student, whenever you see something like this, it's either going to be a private school student or a special ed student who's attending a program, and that's probably the nearest public school that can provide health services.
okay, so they go to a private, they're in Duanesburg, but
They're
they're going to a private
Duanesburg
school
student.
closer to Middleburg, and that's why Middleburg's involved?
For sure. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know if it's special ed or a private school, Jeff? Put you on the spot. Sorry.
It looks like a private school.
Anyone else have a question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item. Approve memorandum of agreement between the district and the Duanesburg Teachers Association. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Duanesburg Central School District hereby approves the addendum to the employment agreement of the DTA contract dated May 2, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Melissa, thank you. Second, please.
I'll second.
Francis, thanks.
Sure.
Questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, this is that other one that's transferring to the new trust.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Last financial item. Accept agreement with Vander Hayden. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the agreement between Vander Hayden and Duanesburg CSD for student services between April 24, 2023 and June 23, 2023, as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Sarah? I owe
Tony.
Sarah one.
Thanks, Shane.
And how about Tony second?
Great.
Sorry, you got cheated. Okay. Questions or comments on this one?
This is what we transferred money over to
Mhm.
pay for.
Yep. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to other. Approve Committee on Special Education minutes. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the CSE meetings and their minutes from the March 23, 30, April 3, 4, 5, 17, 18, 19, and 20, 2023 meetings. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Francis, thanks.
Get out there
Avis.
first this time.
Thank you. Avis gets a second. Questions or comments on this? Yeah, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Now we're on to personnel. Accept resignations for retirement. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the following resignations for retirement. Lisa Snyder, Kitchen Cook and Supervisor, effective June 23, 2023. And Deborah Dames, High School Teacher Aide, effective June 30, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Francis, thanks.
Nope.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Voice, that's
It's your cough. You got a frog. But I'll
Tony.
second.
Okay, thanks. Never mind me. Questions or comments?
I'd just like to thank them both for their time to our district.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next personnel item, accept resignations. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignations of Katie Box, Spanish teacher, effective June 23, 2023, and Leslie Gangemi, pardon me, special education teacher, effective June 22, 2023. Do I have a motion? Sarah had her hand up first.
It's okay.
And will you second, please? Thanks. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? You got to be quick.
I know,
Yeah,
I'm a
we're
little slow
rolling
tonight,
here.
I'm sorry. When are we posting for these? I just know it's.
We have filled the special ed opening, and we have already posted the Spanish opening and have candidates. I don't know when the interviews are, but
Okay,
they're soon.
thank you.
Nice, nice. Okay, approve election inspectors. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following election inspectors for the May 16, 2023 budget and Board of Education member vote at a rate of $15 per hour. Maxine Christman, Forrest Holroyd, and Rosemary Schiffner. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion. You got it. It's you, Tony.
Was that Tony or
It's Tony.
Francis? I'm
It
not
was the
gonna.
same time.
I don't want to get in trouble. Okay, so we'll give it to Tony, and how about a second from Francis?
You
Is that
got
good?
it.
Questions or comments? Yes.
Curious, how is the selection process made, or do people apply for this?
Begging and feeding. Mhm. We,
Sure. Okay, thank you.
we really thank them for their service. It's
Yeah.
a long day.
That's why burgers.
You got to drive somewhere there.
That's why burgers 20.
Anyone else have questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approve summer appointments. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education approve the following list of summer appointments as recommended by the superintendent. All appointments are employees at will, and the appointment at this time does not guarantee employment for the entire school term. And as listed. Do I have a motion? Melissa, thank you.
A second.
Teresa, thank you. Questions or comments?
I think this is such a great program, and I'm so glad we do it. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
I think
Did
it's
you want to
amazing.
add anything on that, Jim, or?
No, I
Okay.
thank the teachers for their time over the summer, and both the enrichment program in the middle school and the boost program in the elementary school are really great, and I'm glad that they do it.
Good, thank
I
you.
just had a quick question.
Yep.
The different weeks, one of the elementary school programs is going to be 4 hours and the other is 3.5. Is that just the availability of the teachers that are, or is that a typo, or
That's a
they're both Monday through Friday?
So one is the
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
the
okay,
aids,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
the aid day is shorter.
Okay, so they're going to leave earlier. Okay, thank you.
I think we probably pay them for a half an hour planning time or something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? All right, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Last personnel item. Approve appointment S. Dorizio. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Shannon Dorizio to a 3-year probationary appointment as a special education teacher in the special education tenure area, Master's Step 14, commencing September 1, 2023, and ending August 31, 2026, contingent upon compliance with the requirements of education law. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Sarah. And Tony, will you second?
Yes.
Sarah's doing the silent sneak.
You two got a connection tonight.
She needs to
Good.
borrow the paddles.
I'm in like
Good.
a really good,
It's good.
field of view, I
They
think.
got something special happening there tonight.
Okay, so we have the motion. Questions or comments?
I have a question. Did we receive this applicant through OLAS, or how were they recommended? How did we get them?
I think that this was an OLAS application.
It's an OLAS. Was it posted anywhere else?
I don't think that it was posted anywhere else
No?
other than OLAS. No.
Okay, thanks.
We did get a pretty good pool of special ed teachers.
Awesome. Okay.
Can I ask, what is OLAS?
OLAS is I don't know what it stands for, but OLAS is something that
Oh,
one of the BOCES has a service where pretty much everybody across the state posts education jobs. So if you're a teacher and you're looking for a job, you are probably looking on OLAS to find it.
okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Brings the snowman, Gabe Wormhut.
All right, next up is an executive session. So for those of you in the audience, essentially the board has conducted all its regular business. We're going to go into executive session. Well, we need a motion, of course, to discuss matters pertaining to the employment history of a specific district employee or employees. And when we come out of executive session, we're just going to close the regular meeting. So there's really nothing more to see tonight. Thank you all for coming. So I need a motion to move to executive session.
I got a motion.
Thank you. Francis? And a second. Sarah beat you. Again, the silent hand.
I'm
the
telling you,
silent
two
hand.
special
All in
connection
favor?
tonight.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Is it just you need to know how to work things? Is that what it is?
I just go over the process a little bit, and some people might have questions, and I'm probably the worst person in the world to like answer any like technical stuff. So
Okay.
I'm hoping it's not going to be very long.
You want to go down to the?
Yeah, that's probably best. And before we head over, we've got everyone on the board has gotten an invitation to attend the junior senior award ceremony